Hello, and welcome to this video called Podcast Marketing Strategies. I'm going to teach you different tips and techniques to grow your podcast from 0 to 150,000 listeners or beyond. It's up to you. My name is Jack Rhysider, and I make the show Darknet Diaries. That's a podcast I made, started about 3 years ago. And I also like to blog about podcasting at lime.link. Now, why am I telling you about marketing? Well, I have a podcast, and this is the top 10 most popular episodes, and you see I'm hitting in the 300,000 downloads per episode area, and I did that from coming from nobody. I didn't have a corporate sponsorship or a brand or a network, and I'm nobody famous or anything. I built this from the ground up, from 0 to here, and it took a ton of hard work to do this. And so I've been in the trenches and I've done it. Some marketing advice you get from people are going to be like, from people who have never really marketed something to become this big, or they've done it in a long time ago or something like that. And so, I want to share with you all the tips and strategies I did to get my show to get this big. And it's going to take a lot of work. So bear with me. Now, I say, some people have done some tips and strategies in the past, and I don't think they really work anymore. Like, for instance, Aaron Mahnke made the podcast Lower in 2015, and when he did it, he just did it on accident. Like, he read one of his stories into a microphone and then showed it to a friend, and friend's like, I think this is a podcast. And he's like, what? I don't think this is a podcast. Are you sure? And so Aaron Mahnke has been quoted by saying, this was an accident. Lower was an accident. And almost immediately, once he released the show, it blasted off and took off. It was top of the charts in Apple Podcasts. And within 6 months, it was a full-time income for him. And it, completely changed his life from there on out because he was getting TV offers and all this extra stuff. But that was 2015. Back then, Serial had just come out and podcasts were just becoming like this frenzy. And so there weren't that many shows out there to try to find. And he had lucked out enough to get a new and noteworthy, untrending, featured on Apple Podcasts. And that's what skyrocketed his show from the beginning. And he did this with pretty much no marketing attempt. Like, he just kind of threw it down and put it out there, and it picked up all on its own. And this isn't a strategy that can work today. It's extremely rare. You cannot just throw down your podcast and expect it to go somewhere. This happened at the right time. He struck when the iron was hot. Podcasting is still a great time to get into. There's still lots of opportunity, but you can't just throw your podcast out there and expect it to take off. Another misconception I see is people talking about new and noteworthy in iTunes. Forget about it. That was 2012. That was no longer an issue. Even if you get in new and noteworthy today, it's not that big of a deal, and it's almost impossible to get in there. There's just no reason to even care about that. Another thing you shouldn't worry about are ratings and reviews. That's just not a method for getting discovered at all, period. Rating and reviews don't help where you are in the iTunes charts or the Apple Podcast charts. So that's not going to help at all. And what is someone going to go to your show in Apple Podcasts, look at the reviews, and then decide to listen to the show? I just don't see that being possible, or likely, right? So forget about ratings, reviews. Stop asking your listeners for that. Okay, so there's 3 major challenges that all podcasters face, and I want to get into these. First is you got to make a great show. Without having a great show, people are going to not really recommend your show. Word of mouth is absolutely king. Without having a great show, all your marketing efforts are going to be wasted, because if you put all this effort into getting someone to listen to your show and then they turn it off in 5 minutes, you just wasted all that time or money or effort or whatever. And then once you make a great show, you've got to market it, because even, like I said, you just put it down in the world, it's not going to get picked up. You've got to do stuff to get it noticed. And then the last thing is to monetize it or sustain it and keep it going, right? And that might just be finding time or balance in your day to podcast. I'm going to talk about how to make a great show real quick. And then for the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about marketing it, monetizing it. We're not going to get into it in this video, but I do blog about that on lime.link. So what goes into making a great show? Well, I think you should fulfill a deep desire that your listeners want fulfilled. Like, for instance, if your show is about Bitcoin and your audience is like really nerdy about Bitcoin, where they've read everything about Bitcoin and they read all the articles and they listen to all the podcasts and they just can't get enough about Bitcoin. Well, obviously they want to be satisfied in a way that they want to learn something about Bitcoin that nobody else is teaching them, right? So you really need to dig deep in the well of knowledge when it comes to cryptocurrencies and stuff like that to find something new for these people and bring it to them, because they have an insatiable appetite for knowing more about Bitcoin. And so if you can say, all right, here's some stuff you didn't know, they're going to walk out of that podcast being satisfied, right? They're going to feel, oh, this is great. I know more about Bitcoin, and that's my whole desire, right? So you have to really know what it is your listeners want and fulfill that. Another thing you can look at is defining your value and leading with that. So what I mean by value is figure out what you want your audience to take away when they're done listening to the show, right? So maybe you want them to be feel better, like because you're trying to make them laugh, right? So you're doing a comedy show, you want them to laugh, that's going to make them feel better. Okay, so you have to kind of reverse engineer. How do we do this? We can make them laugh more or something like that. Maybe you want to educate your audience by teaching them certain things, or maybe you want to expand their outlook or mind, like by showing them different sides of an argument, so whatever it is that you want your listeners to take away from your show, make sure you're delivering that blow by blow. Like, just keep landing those hits. Start out, like if it's a comedy show, start out with your best possible bit, your best joke, and then just keep hitting joke after joke. A lot of shows start out with no listeners and no subscribers, and they're starting out with like an ad. And it just makes no sense to me. Like, that's not what you want your audience to take away from here, is an ad for something. You want them to feel a certain way by listening to this show. Start with that. Get it to them right away. Don't hold back. Don't slow roll into it. Get it going and keep it going the whole show. If you've got something that is lulling, it's not landing, there's a bit that you just didn't like, or a segment that just wasn't there for you, take it out. You have to learn how to edit. Your audience really depends on you deleting the junk out of your show and just leaving in great stuff. And I should say that there's kind of two schools of thought here. The first school of thought is to create something great and amazing and high quality and fantastic. And the other school of thought is to, that might take a while, right? It might take you 2 weeks or a month to create a podcast like that, an episode. But the other school of thought is just kind of like a stream of thought. Just get it out there in the world, unedited, unfiltered, go, go, go. Let's get more stuff out. Let's do a daily show. Maybe we could do 2 a day. Like, just keep throw stuff as much as you can out there. And the thoughts are here. I mean, I like the first one, which is, I don't want my listeners to be behind on my podcast. I want my podcast to be their favorite podcast, and I want them to be fully caught up and can't wait for the next one, right? So that's my school of thought that I like, which is make high quality stuff. But the other one, which is just kind of stream of thought, get it out there, more content, is really fulfilling a need that some listeners have. They just want more, they have a daily drive. They drive to work. They want to hear every day. I mean, there's a ton of radio shows out there that do 4-hour shows every morning for people to listen to on the way to work. It's possible to do a 4-hour show every day and just keep it entertaining and going. And like, just keep it out there, because people want that every day as they're at work, listening to work, driving, long commutes, whatever it is. You can do that too. So it depends on what you want to do. I still think that people turn good shows off to listen to great shows. So if your show's good, it's not good enough. You really need to go and make a great show. And another thing you can do is do something remarkable, like something newsworthy, something outside the box, something that when people listen to it, they're just like, I have to talk about this with someone. And they talk about it with their spouse or their coworker or their friend, or something like, hey, I just heard on this podcast, this thing. Here's what happened. And if you have people talking about your show, that is fantastic. That's going to help the show spread. If people listen to your show and they're just like, I didn't really get anything out of it, and I have nothing to say about it, then that show's not going to spread. You're not going to have your listeners being your little marketers for you. So do something remarkable. Make people talk about what they heard. Another good thing is to get mentorship and tons of feedback, especially when you're starting out, because nobody starts out great. And so you can reach out to podcasters that you really admire and respect and say, hey, can you listen to the first 5 minutes of my podcast? I really respect and admire you. And I just want you to know, I just want to hear your opinion on whether or not this is a good opening bit. And you can ask something like that, or a cold opening. Another thing you can ask is, just when you're asking for feedback at the beginning, you give it to a friend or a family and you say, hey, can you listen to this? And they say, okay. And then you follow up. Did you listen? Yeah. Okay. And the worst thing you can ask for feedback is, what did you think? Because you're going to get a really vague response. It was great. And that's not going to help you at all with your podcasting. So you need to ask things like, at what point did you turn it off? And, if you have a 1-hour show, they might have not listened to it all, right? And they probably didn't. I'll tell you that right now. So now your friend has got this opportunity to say, all right, let's be real with you here. It sounds like you want to know the worst part of it. So I'll tell you, after 5 minutes, I switched and to the middle. And then after that, a couple of minutes in there, I just turned it off. Okay. So why did you not listen? Why did you change at the first 5 minutes? Like, what was it? Were you bored? Or did you already know this information? Was it not funny enough? Like, whatever you're trying to deliver, why did it not deliver to this friend of yours, right? Like, if your friend can't listen to more than 10 minutes of your show, who will be able to? So get into those kind of intimate conversations. Don't feel bad about it. Don't get frustrated. I mean, this is an art. This is a craft. People don't pick up a guitar and start making original music in the first, few hours of playing a guitar. It takes a long time to learn. And podcasting is a skill that takes a long time. So be humble about it. Get tons of feedback. Ask things like, oh, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to tell someone else about this show, right? This is a great question to ask somebody at the beginning, because this is the NPS, Net Promoter Score survey. And what basically is like 1 to 6, they're not going to tell anyone if they give a rating there. 7 and 8, they're just being nice. They don't want to say anything bad, and they didn't necessarily like it that much either. So they're just kind of being nice. You can't really count that for anything. If they say 7 or 8, you say, okay, whatever. But 9 and 10, if they say, oh, I would definitely tell someone about this podcast, that means you've got a podcast that's spreadable. It's worth it's worth marketing, right? And you don't really want to get into the marketing stage of things if your show's not spreadable. If people aren't listening to it and saying, "Oh man, I definitely want to share this and tell other people about it because this is great," especially when there's like people have shared interests and stuff. So ask like really good, specific questions when you're asking for feedback at the beginning. And you can always pay to get better. Like you can take classes, buy books, go to conferences. Here's some examples of some books and courses that I recommend. At the very top in blue, it says Khan Academy, and Khan Academy teamed up with Pixar to make a art of storytelling course. And this is a free course you can pick up. So they teach you character development and story arc. It's great. Over here on the book is called Make Noise. It's my favorite book about podcasting because it really dives in. Like the first half is all about how to make a great show. It really gets into that. And then it starts talking about marketing at towards the end. So the very best book possible on podcasting right now. I really wish I had this starting out because it's just perfect. Out on the Wire is a great book written by people who are like This American Life, Radio Lab, 99% Invisible, this kind of show, these shows. And it's the byline there says the storytelling secrets of the new masters of radio. And so they explain how they do storytelling in a fantastic way. It's amazing. They really break it down for you in a way that's like a formulaic way. Like this is a story about X, but Y happened instead. It's fantastic. And then there's also Power Up Your Podcast with Storytelling, which is a creative live course. And that's done by Alex Blumberg, who's the CEO of Gimlet. So this is a fantastic course as well. He really gets into what it takes to be a good storyteller. And then we go to Masterclass, and there's tons of things on storytelling on masterclass.com. So Neil Gaiman, fantastic author, writes The Art of Storytelling. Dan Brown, another fantastic author, writes How to Write a Thriller. Margaret Atwood, R.L. Stein, Malcolm Gladwell also teach writing. The reason why I'm telling you about storytelling is because I really think that the better you can tell stories on a spoken word show, the better your show is going to be. Storytelling, I think, is by far the most effective thing to keep your audience engaged and glued. You're going to hear them, if they can hear something where it's like, oh, this is interesting, I can't wait to hear more, and they're like pushing their headphones closer, and they're like, wait, I want to hear this part. If you can get your audience glued to the show because there's something interesting they want to hear next, then you've got fantastic attention. And that's what you're really grabbing here, is you want your audience's attention. And if you could just get their attention glued, then you're doing great. So I think every podcast, it can benefit from being a better storyteller. And there's tons of ways that you can level up your storytelling game. I mean, I'm talking any podcast, from like a sports podcast to a news podcast. Like, if you could just explain what happened in a really concise way that tells the story and in a beautifully done, I think people are going to love you for that. They will love you for that, because they'll be like, you explain the thing just so well. I love the way you tell me the news, right? Like, it's just a really good skill. Lastly, I want to just mention that Masterclass also has courses on comedy, and there's one where Steve Martin teaches comedy. And if you think about Conan O'Brien or any like the Daily Show on Comedy Central and stuff, these aren't people who just get up. I mean, these are professional comics, right? The people who have done this all their life. They literally do not just turn on the camera and start winging it on the show. They have a whole team of writers who write every single bit that comes on the show, and how it's going to play out, and they practice it and all this stuff. And so I don't see how people can just turn on a mic and do like a comedy show for an hour and expect it to just be funny the whole time. Like, you really need to, this is a craft. And if you really want to make a comedy show, you really need to focus on your craft and practice it and go through the motions of what it takes to write a bit and a joke and all these things, and just really like take your craft seriously. Like, make a show people are going to love. And the more you put into it, the more passion you get into your own crafty show, the more it's going to show, and the better chances you have of it taking off. All right, so that's how to make a great show. Let's get into marketing it. So like I said, just because you make it and throw it down in the world doesn't mean anybody's going to pick it up. So you have to start somewhere. So let's make our first goal 150 downloads per episode. If you can hit that, you're doing better than 50% of the shows out there. And I think there's something magical about this number where it starts to grow on its own at that point, and it's just hard to get past, because you're not really getting the support of your audience until then. Once you get to this size, now you have kind of their support to help you, carry you to the next stage. So start out by just telling your friends and family. You probably got 10 people that you know that you can say, hey, I've got this podcast. Please listen to it, and please share it with someone else. Tell some, that's what I'm begging you. Of course, you want to ask for tons of feedback at the beginning. And like I said, don't say, what'd you think? Ask, what point did you turn it off? How could I make it better? Where would you like this to improve? Like that kind of thing. Now, post to every one of your social medias. You probably have some kind of social media now. Social media is fantastic. We're going to get into that a lot more, but of course, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram are the biggest, most popular, but then there's also TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Pinterest. You might not think to post a podcast to Pinterest, but why not? Like, just post, like, the more stuff you have out there linking back to your show, the more you're telling people, the better chances you have of being discovered. So post everywhere and keep posting everywhere a lot. Then use any superpowers you have. Because here's the thing, I know you are a creator. You're here because you made a podcast. You probably are. This probably isn't the first thing you ever created. You've probably created other things in the past. You're a creator. So what's the other stuff you've created? Did you create a blog before? Did you create a YouTube channel, a Twitch channel? If so, get on there and tell all those people that you have, made an audience there, and say, hey, I made this new thing. You should come check me out here. And then keep posting there. Make it like a permanent card at the end of every video of Twitter or of YouTube, or make a sidebar on your blog that says constantly, here's this podcast I'm working on, come check it out. Like, make it a big deal. And if you have any superpowers, yes, that's great. Use them. And if you have any friends that are creators, use them. Like, if you have a blogger friend or a YouTuber friend, say, please, I'm begging you, I really need this favor. Can you put like a banner ad up for a month, right? Or something that says, please listen to this podcast. And that really does help a lot. And then I really like the idea of one-on-one chats with potential listeners. And what I mean here is, like, you are probably a person who goes online, finds interesting things, and then brings them onto your podcast to talk about them, right? So where are you finding these interesting things? Are they on social media? Are they on Reddit? Are they in Discord? Whatever. Find them and then have chats with people who are commenting on it. So like, if Reddit, you see an article, some people are chatting some interesting things. Hey, let's chat up with this person. Hey, that's an interesting point of view you have there. Have you ever thought about this? And have a couple public back and forth one-on-ones, and then take it to like a private conversation and say, wow, you've got some really cool views here, or I really like what, how we're going back and forth. Let's take this a step further. What other things have you gotten into, right? Have you ever thought about this? Or, just kind of create a friendship, because you have this one person who you are connecting with. And now once you connect with them, you can then say, hey, I think I'm going to put this whole topic in this conversation into a podcast that I'm making. I appreciate all the feedback you're giving me, because it's really giving me some good info to add. Now you've got a potential new listener, right? Oh, you make a podcast. I would love to hear that conversation in the podcast. Or, hey, I talked about this particular topic in a past episode, right? So I do a podcast on this exact same thing. You might be interested to hear other thoughts I've had on this as well. And now you've got, kind of a soft podcast, pitch to someone. It's not like you're not IMing, a ton of people. Please listen to my podcast. Please listen to my podcast in a very spammy way. You're actually like creating that relationship first and then soft pitching them. And if they don't like it, oh, well, you still made a friend online, right? So you can chat with people and people now. So I really like this, because once you get somebody in that space who can then listen to your show and check it out, now you've got somebody who you can ask for feedback. Like, okay, did you think I covered this enough? Or is there something else? Or do you think that that was well explained? Or whatever it is, you can ask for that specific feedback. Again, asking the specific feedback is really going to help a lot when you're starting out, because it's really, that's the best time to get as many pieces of feedback as possible. And I want to say something like, I have 300,000 downloads per episode right now. I have so much fan interaction that I literally can't get it to it all. There's tons of unread emails, DMs that are left unread. Like, it's just, I can't get to it all. But you have the ability to get to every single piece of fan interaction that happens at this stage. If somebody comments on your Twitter post or your Facebook post, respond. Say something thoughtful in response. Even if they just put a heart, put 2 hearts or something. I don't know. Just be there for your fans. Let them know that you're like, hey, I'm only like 1 message away, and I would love to, have chats with you or whatever. Anything. Just strike up that relationship with your audience, because you can at that stage. You're not getting that many pieces of interaction from people, and so when you get them, make sure to kind of embrace that, because that's really where you're going to get a lot of information. And you want to be as close, in my opinion, as close to your audience as you can if you want to get engagement from them. So like if your listeners are on Facebook and you're not on Facebook, now they want to reach out to you, they want to say something. Well, what are they going to do? Well, what are they going to go to the website and look for your email address and then send you an email? Okay, that could work. But like, if you're on Facebook and you make a big deal of like, hey, we're right here on Facebook, and they're on Facebook, now it's just like a quick click, bam. Oh yeah, let's just look for this podcast here. Yep, there it is. And I want to message them. And so you want to go to their front door basically and just stand there until they're ready to have some sort of conversation with you. And that's how you're going to get more engagement early on, is just to be in their social media. So let me just figure out where we are here. So once we get to 150 listeners, then you start to get the wind on your back. You can start to feel that there's some critical mass happening, and your audience is kind of pushing you along. They're helping you, like, because you're going to see one or two people maybe a month say, hey, you should check out this show. I just listened to this episode. I think you guys would like it. If you see something like that on social media, you've got your audience as little marketers helping you, and they're helping you get further and further along. So, yeah, it's just it's a cool goal to hit. Once you get to 150, you kind of feel that, but it's like $1 in the bank that's, getting interest. So you could retire, and then in 50 years, that dollar is going to be quite a lot, but it's going to take a slow time to get there, right? So you want to keep building. I don't know if there's ever a time where you want to stop growing, but you got to keep adding fuel to this fire. So our next goal is to get to 1,500 listeners. Now, if you can do that, you'll be in the top 20%. And I like setting these kind of goals because it's worth celebrating these milestones to get in the top 50%, in the top 20%. Like, these are fantastic. And once you get to this level of 1,500, you're going to feel even more of that wind on your back. There's going to be more listeners that are going to be going out and telling other listeners to come listen to your show and this kind of thing. So it's worth kind of notating that and saying, yes, we made it to this next level, this next rung. And there's different kind of growth strategies for these different tiers as well. What you're doing when you're aiming for growth is just like a 1 to 5% growth month over month. I mean, every big show wishes they could have this. And so you might as well do that when you're starting too. And so when you look at the numbers, like if you had 200 downloads per episode and you want to grow at 5%, that's just getting 10 new listeners. And this is kind of the expectation I want you to kind of think of, is not try to say, well, how do I market my show and get hundreds of new listeners this month or something? Like, dude, you need to try to get 10 new listeners this month. Like, that's your goal. And the reason why this goal is important is because if you can do this consistently over and over and over, it becomes like a muscle that you're exercising. Your marketing skills are getting better. And you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and get this person from over here and that person from over here. And you're just going to keep building, and you're building relationships, and you're making connections, and you're being more noticeable. And it just gets better and better. You learn how to pitch your show better. You learn how to market yourself better. Like your whole story just gets finely tuned, and it gets better. So if you just get in this habit, and I know it's a grind and I know it's a hustle, but the more you just get in there and say, okay, we need to go gather up 2 more people today to go listen to this podcast. How can we do it? I could wear my shirt to the grocery store. I could hand out stickers, somewhere. Like there's just lots of different ways that you can think about 10 new listeners a month. Like, you're not trying to reach for the moon here. You're just trying to get that, because literally anything above 0% growth is progress. So if you're grabbing new listeners wherever you can, even if it's 5 new listeners a month, that is progress at growth, right? You don't want to be at 0 and you don't want to be going down, but you do want to be getting new listeners every single episode. And so, like, yeah, I want to just kind of set your expectation, like figure out where your numbers are now, and then what would be 5% growth to that. I mean, I'm aiming for 1% growth currently, right? So it's not even like I'm trying to get that big of a growth. So there's this book called Traction, and it's written by Gabriel Weinberg, and they talk about how to go viral in that book. And it's interesting because I kind of understood this viral loop a little bit better. So in order for something to go viral, it has to kind of complete this viral loop, and this is how it works. So a listener would be first exposed to your podcast, right? So have you ever been like told, hey, listen to this podcast, and you go subscribe to it, but then it takes you like a long time to actually listen to it? Like I've spent like 6 months with like a podcast in my queue without listening to it, right? And then I finally, all right, I'll check it out today. So 6 months later is when I finally played it. And then when I did listen to it, I was like, oh yeah, this is good. I want to tell others about it. So this viral loop in podcasts is just very slow sometimes, because you'd really have to wait until they listen to it before they can then tell another, set of potential listeners to go listen to it. And that's what viral is. It's like, I caught this, I liked it, I want you to catch it, and you like it, right? And so then this loop repeats over and over. Those potential listeners now listen, and then they tell it. But just think about how long that takes in podcast land. Like, if your show's an hour long, then when someone listens to it, they're not gonna recommend it to someone in the first 5 minutes. It's gonna take them probably a whole episode before they're like, yeah, that was pretty good. I do want to recommend this to someone else. And most people, I think, don't really know if they like it or not until like the 3rd or 5th episode, right? And so then they're like, okay, look, I am really glued to this show. This is my new favorite podcast. I totally love this. I have to listen to someone. I have to tell someone else about this. So how long does it take for someone to listen to 3 episodes? Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. And that's why podcasts just don't really go viral. You don't just throw it down on the ground, expect a couple of people to find it, and then they start telling others and stuff. If that happens, it's going to be very slow, very slow. And so you're in this, just recognize you're in this very slow game. Like it's going to take years. It took me 3 years to build to this size where I am now. And it's a very slow process. And you have to practice a lot and hustle a lot to get there. All right, so we're trying to hit 1,500 downloads per episode. Let's go back to the basics, because maybe when you made this podcast, you kind of just threw some artwork together and you threw a title together and you threw a description together just to kind of get the thing out the door. Well, now that you're really trying to market this thing, now that you're starting to get some teeth on it, let's go back to the basics and make sure we've got things really set. Because people don't think about this stuff as part of the marketing strategy, but it's extremely important. Artwork should make your potential new listeners stop scrolling. So they're scrolling through their social media feed. They see your podcast artwork. That's what's going to catch their eye first. That's got to make them stop. They got to just, whoa, go back. What was that? That looked cool. You right? Like that's what we're doing. We're visual people. We want to look for something that looks cool when we're scrolling. And if that looks cool, they're going to stop. And what's the next thing they're going to say? They're going to look at the title. What was that, right? And if your title is something like, oh, the Jan and Dean podcast, and they don't know who Jan and Dean are, then they're going to be like, I don't really know what this show's about. Maybe it's not so cool. And they might keep scrolling, right? But if you capture their mind where it's like, this is the UFO conspiracy podcast or something, where it's like, oh, wow, that's exactly what I was thinking this might be. And I want to know more about that, right? And so you can pull your audience in with a really good gripping title. A boring, bland title might not do it. Some people have these really kitschy kind of titles where they play on words and stuff. And okay, but you have something that's alluring, drawing them in. Myths and Legends podcast, the Lore podcast. These are good titles because it's like, ooh, that there's a little bit of mystery to that. What more is in what's going on there, right? And so you just have their attention for like a few seconds, and it has to kind of nail on that one. And so what's the next thing they're going to do when they stop scrolling because of your artwork and they look at the title and it's interesting? They're either going to click on the web link or whatever link you have, they found, or they're going to look at the description of the show. And so that description also has to land. It's got to be like, imagine you're in a elevator with like your idol. And you say, oh my gosh, I'm a huge fan of you. And they say, oh, cool. Hey, by the way, I'm trying to find a cool podcast. Do you have any recommendations? And you make a podcast. You can totally pitch your podcast to your idol right now in this elevator, but you only have 10 seconds to do it. How do you make that? How do you make that sale, right? How do you get them to do it? So that's kind of how you want to word your description to really make your show awesome, exciting. Everyone should subscribe to this thing. So ask your audience, ask your friends, the people who you're connecting with one-on-one. Hey, this is the description I have for the podcast. What do you think? How could I word this better? Like, what do you have any recommendation on how I can make it better? Or ask a copywriter, like, hey, can you listen to one episode, kind of get the idea of what our show's about, and then help me write a really good description for this show. And you only want like 1 or 2 lines. You don't really want it to be too long because you really only have people's attention for a short time. And if you can be concise and specific in your description, then I think people do appreciate that more. Now, I want to go back to artwork for a second. If you don't have like good artistic skills yourself, then it's worth paying someone. And I would pay someone up to like $400 for a good piece of podcast artwork. And it's worth making something really great because it can really bring your show to like a little more professional looking level, and it can really captivate people and pull them in as they're scrolling forever and ever and ever. You want to get them to stop scrolling. It's very important, specific thing, when you're making cool artwork. All right, so the next thing you'll need to do is get your podcast in podcast apps. A lot of people ask me, how do I market a show? I say, where's your podcast? They say it's only on YouTube. Like, that's not a podcast app. There's no wonder you're having trouble, getting this thing to spread, because you're not in any podcast app. And so, yeah, you need to get in the top ones. And at least in Apple Podcasts, because there are a lot of podcast apps pull out of Apple Podcasts. So Apple Podcasts and Spotify and CastBox and Stitcher and Pocket Casts and Overcast, I think, are your top ones that you need to be in. And then start with that, right? Because the thing is that people have these apps on their phones. You want it easy, so that way you just pick up their app on their phone and say, okay, I have I can get this podcast, as easy as I can. And you're going to say, oh, well, there's YouTube apps on every phone. Why don't they just open that? Well, that's because they're not looking for a podcast in YouTube. The podcasts are in podcast players. So it's just, YouTube's not a solution. You can have your podcast on YouTube and in podcast players. That's perfectly fine. But just make sure if you have a podcast, it's in all the good podcast apps out there. Now, you also want to land on your social media, and might as well build a website. And I'll tell you some reasons why in the next few slides. So social media, here's some Twitter cards that I really like. These are bios, right? So these are both podcasts, and they just land one after another, and I love it, and I'll explain why. So first of all, the artwork is cool, and there's two pieces of artwork. There's the banner at the top, which is different than the avatar image. So there's kind of like some effort that went into designing this and building this. It has this really cool aesthetic to it. And then there's the name of the podcast right at the beginning. Cool, easy. But then there is a one-line description of what this show's about. That's great. That's not complex. That's not over the top. That's not mealy-mouthed. That's just like, boom, here we go. This is what this show's about. And then it says, here is who makes it. So there's a connection to the creator of the show. That's great too, because sometimes you want to message the show creator and tell them what you think or whatever. And so you have that ability. And then there's the podcast website. Easy peasy, plain as day, right? So there's so many podcasts out there that have Twitter bios that just don't have any of this stuff. They don't have their podcast name. They don't have a link to their podcast. They don't have any good artwork at all. It's just like low effort. And if you're going to put such low effort into a social media bio, people kind of feel like your podcast might be low effort too, right? So they just might skip it. But when you put a high level of effort into, making your stuff look good, then people might say, hey, I want to give this a try. I think this might be worthy of my time. You don't want to waste people's time. I'm going to get more into social media in a minute, but I just wanted to cover what like the basics of a good bio looks like. And this can carry over into any other social media. Your Facebook bio can look just like this. Your Instagram bio can look just like this. But these are some of the things that I'm looking for that tells me whether you have a good podcast bio or not. Having a website, I think, is important because, well, people ask me, how do I market my show? I say, well, do you have a website? No, just the one that the podcast hosting provider made for me. Well, you might want to invest in that because there's a ton of reasons why a good website can help get new listeners. Like, it's a marketing tool. Like, for one, you can control the feeling and the atmosphere of this, right? You can see the design and the layout, while your hosting provider really doesn't give you any of that option. They don't give you the ability to change the color of the background, for instance, or what is the biggest, your fonts and these kind of things. Like, so these are some podcasting websites that I think look good. 99% Invisible is a show about architecture and design, and you can kind of see like this graph paper look to it and this kind of architectural feel of the buttons, very crisp corners and stuff like that. You kind of get that feeling there. Ars Paradoxica draws you in because it's interesting and it has like cool colors and stuff, right? Like, it has a nice presentation to it. And there's a nice big button that says start here, right? This is where you start. Now, in a podcast app, you don't have the ability to tell audiences, where do you start? What do I start with, the latest episode, the first episode? Which one? But here on your website, you can control that. You can say start here. And this is a show that you have to start in order. So it makes sense that they tell people how to start. Criminal, I think, is a fantastic website. It's got this nice black and white thing, which is cool because criminals are, I don't know, kind of black and white in the sense of, did you make a crime or not? Like, is it against the law or not? Like, kind of thing, right? So there's a nice big play button on there. I like that. I like the font. I like the look of it. Like, there's original artwork for every episode. It's just got a really good stuff. And I want to show you some other podcast artworks. So, podcast websites. So I'm going to go here to do a search for Joe Rogan podcast, because this is probably the most popular podcast in the world. So the first hit here is the Joe Rogan podcast site, podcast.joerogan.com. So he's got his own website. That's cool. But when I come to his website, it doesn't deliver. It doesn't have graphics in a way that really pull me in. I don't really get a sense of what this show's about. There's a play button here, but does that even work? Like, what episode is playing? Like, I like the fact that, hey, let's just play this right away, but nothing is ticking. I don't hear anything. And what episode would even play here? Is this an intro? Like, doesn't make any sense. If I click on any of these things, it just takes me to YouTube. So I just don't think that this is a very effective website. And you might say, but he's got the biggest podcast ever. Why doesn't he do it, or what? I don't know. The thing is that I don't think he cares to get even more listeners at this point. He's just like, I just need to get this out here. And the real thing is that once you get to a certain size, you really don't need to have something. And he's at the size where he just doesn't give a crap about whether or not he has a good podcast or not. The next biggest podcast, or possibly the biggest podcast in the world, is The Daily. So let's search for The Daily podcast. The first hit I see is The Daily New York Times. This is a column, so I'll try clicking that. And does this look like a podcast website to you? It's not. I don't see a play button. I don't see The Daily's logo. But if I were to click on this first article, oh, I see. There's The Daily's logo. There's a play button down here. Okay, so this is the podcast, but I just don't like the look of it, right? This to me doesn't say that it's a podcast, and it really doesn't have, I don't know, it doesn't have it. It's not delivering to me. There is the next link down is more of a podcast. And it's like, oh, okay, now I see that this is a podcast, and here's today's episode. And it's I don't know. I think this should be up here first. Like, this is what I don't like, is when you look for someone's podcast and it's the second link and not the first. And that goes for stuff you should know too. So this is also possibly one of the biggest podcasts out there. I think these are the top 3: Joe Rogan, The Daily, and Stuff You Should Know. And so if we search for this one, well, the first hit isn't even a website. It's just Google's podcast player. So it takes us to podcast.google.com as the first hit. I think it's very important that if you search for a podcast by name in Google, you should get the podcast website first. And so the second hit isn't their website. It's Apple's website. So this is a big problem too. And the third hit, they are owned by iHeart. So this is their official website. And again, I hate that their official website is third on the list of hits when you search for it. That shouldn't be. Your podcast website should come up very first in the search results. And you should do better SEO to get that. Because from here, you can now control the look and feel of this. But I'm bored with this. This is not exciting to me. This looks like, oh, maybe this is stuff I should know. Like, what? Like, I feel like a teacher's telling me I don't know enough stuff or something. Like, I'm not inspired by this. I'm not like excited about it. I really don't know what, it's like, is this like a teaching thing? Is this a comedy show? Like, it doesn't really draw me into anything here because it's just telling me the title. Like, this is missing it. And again, you can say, but this is the biggest show out there. Like, how could they fail so many times? They've been out for a long time. I think they're on episode like 2000 now. And so they just don't they hit the right time and they've grown massively. And they have the backing of iHeart behind them and so many other big shows. And the Daily has the backing of the New York Times, right? So the New York Times can say, hey, come listen to our podcast. And that's kind of their superpower, right? They have a huge website that can recommend people listen to this, and they, have a huge presence. All right, so that's just kind of critiquing some stuff. Some people might say, but I have a website already on my hosting provider. They provide this to me. Well, I want to show you my website from my hosting provider. This is, I get hosted on Megaphone. This is the website they provide for me, okay? So first of all, I don't even see my show's logo, right? That's not there. I don't have the font that I use, my official font that I use for my show. I don't have, there's a lot of other things that I'd want to tell people, like which episode do you start out with? What are some of the other things that I want people to see when they start looking for my show, right? So let me show you the difference of going to my website, right? So if you search for my show, even without even writing the word podcast, you're going to get my show, first hit, that's great. But then there's also some subcategories here. I'm sorry, some subpages. And then Google has this cool thing where if you search on a mobile phone, you can actually hit play right away without having to go anywhere. Like it's just right in the browser. So that's kind of an important little feature to have. And then Twitter is my second hit, or after Google Podcasts. So Twitter is also, I've done a lot of got a lot of Twitter engagement. So that's the second hit. I mean, that seems to be more popular than Apple's page. And I'd rather people go to my website or my Twitter before going to Apple, because I want to engage with them. I want to connect with them. I want to draw them in. I want to pull them in more, and not necessarily send them to some other website that I don't know. So let's go to the website. So look at this, right? We've got something that is supposed to captivate you and draw you in and say, oh, wow, this is mysterious, or I want to know more about this. Like, that's the whole point of this. And, it gives you kind of a quick story, true stories from the dark side of the internet, a quick, bam, this is what this show's about. And then it goes right into the latest episode. And there's a big fat play button right there. So you can say, wait, can I listen to this right now? Yep, there we go. So it's playing. Like, you can jump into this right away. And then I show, like, here's some places you can subscribe to the show. Like, you open up your favorite app, here you go. And then here's some recommended episodes. Like, these are two of the favorites, but then here are the two most downloaded. So if people are having trouble figuring out which episode to start with, these four are great to start with, which I think helps people. And then I have some write-ups in some news outlets. The Guardian, Vulture, and New York Times has written about me. And so I'm put this right on the front page because this is important. This is the social proofing to say, hey, these places have written about me. How come you haven't listened to this show yet? Like, everyone's talking about it. Why aren't you here, right? So I'm this is a way to kind of pull in the audience even more to say, hey, you need to get in on this. And if you look at my, hosting provider's website, it lacks compared to this, right? Like, there's tons of imagery and artwork and stuff to draw you in. And I'm not saying to have so much artwork on yours, but maybe a nice banner, right, to start out with, just to pull them in. Like, what's the feeling? What's the theme of your show, and what do you get out of it? And can you get an artist to kind of capture that, and that draws your audience in even more, because your listeners are going to do the hard work on telling someone, go to this website, and they go, right? A new possible listener goes here, and now you've got to make that sale. You've got to finalize that deal. Like, yes, you have arrived at the place you need to be. I can't wait for you to listen to this kind of thing, right? So what can you do to get them into it at all? And if you look again at like this isn't drawing me in. This is a very plain, it's a perfectly good website, but it's not great. And so I'm just saying there's a lot you can do to make a great website. It does cost to make a great website. Like, if you don't know how to do that, you might spend $10,000 on a website like this, or $20,000. If you can do it, that's great. Do it. But yeah, it might be expensive to build this. And so you might be stuck with the hosting provider's website for a while, which is fine. It'll get you by. But some other stuff that you can do on a website like this is write other articles. So like one thing that people like to do are they finish listening to my show, and then they want to know what's another show. So they Google shows like Darknet Diaries, right? Because they want to see that. And look what comes up first. You might also like this. And this is a page on my website that tells people here's some other podcasts that you can listen to, right? And so even if people are done with my show, or they are sick of it, or don't like it, or whatever, or they didn't like the style, but they want others like it, I can still have that relationship with that audience as they're leaving my show, right? And that's fantastic, because that's delivering even more value to them. Remember, one of our things at the beginning was, how do we make a great show? Find what they want. Find what your listeners want. In this case, they want more podcasts like this, or other podcasts like this. And so I'm giving them what they want, even if it's not my show. And I don't want you to think that you need to have like some sort of iron grip on your audience where you can't let them go ever. Help them even if it doesn't benefit you, because they'll appreciate you as a creator even better. And even if they didn't like your show, they can still walk away saying, that's a great show for other people, I just didn't like it. And they'll support you because you're helping them in other ways. So yeah, you can't make pages like this on your hosting provider's website, right? And so you can make tons of things. You can have transcripts on your website. You can have extra articles, bonus content, more features, videos, all these kind of things that you just can't put here. You don't have that control. So a website just is a way to really build that interaction, build the SEO, because when people are searching Google for random things, you might come up because your transcript talks about that, right? So yeah, that's just some things that you can do to like really make a website rock. And keep that in mind. Next thing we need to be able to do is set social media on fire. This is important because here's Gary Vaynerchuk in this little video here, and he's always the one saying people aren't even like looking at the road when they're driving down the road. They're looking at their phones. They've got their head down in their phone, which is ridiculously dangerous, but it happens. And why are we so glued to like this? But we are glued to our social media feed, and we're just scrolling and scrolling, looking for something there. And that's where you need to be. Don't make a billboard with your brand. Don't make something that's not on social media. The social media is where everyone is looking right now. So just get on there, be on there, and it's spreadable on social media. People can share and comment and tell others. It's just easy to like tell others like, oh yeah, I like this. You should listen to this too. So social media is the number one place to just help spread your word. I don't like social media. I hate it, but boy, has it helped me tremendously on marketing a show. And I really only joined to market my stuff. I'm not there to do much else. So one thing you should do is just grow your social media followers. Like do it independently from your podcast. Don't expect your podcast to grow and then your social media grow. Do the opposite. Build your social media and then get those people on social media to listen to your podcast, convert them to listeners. And like make it a goal to get 10,000 listeners in a year. Like make that your current goal. And I'm sorry, 10,000 followers on social media in a year. And so to do that, you can just read tons of articles. How do I grow social media? And there's tons and tons of strategies to do this. Do all the strategies. Don't do one. Like the thing that worked for me is just to post content a lot, like daily, comment on tons of posts, reshare content, like retweet or share again, upvote tons of things, and just keep posting. Like just be there. Take chats further. Don't just respond with one person and that's it. Ask questions. Get into the conversation. Like open up conversations and keep conversations going. Like get going, like be memorable to people. If you just say one thing and then it doesn't really open up the conversation, they're going to respond or whatever, and that's it. It's over. But if you'd go back and forth like 4 or 5 times, now they're starting to recognize your picture and your username, and they're like, okay, this is interesting stuff. This is some interesting stuff. I want to follow this person, right? And so that's how you get people to follow you. and be memorable. Say things, post things, do things that people are like, oh yeah, that was interesting. I want to show someone else that. And I got to try to remember this person's name or something, right? Like just be memorable, be noticeable, be in front of people. And if you do that on social media, you're going to get a lot of followers. Now you might say, okay, well, what am I posting daily? Am I posting, listen to my podcast every day? No. Listen, I know you are a chatterbox. You have a podcast that probably goes on for like 30 minutes or an hour of you talking. What the heck are you talking about? Are you talking about the news? Are you talking about sports? Are you talking about something funny? Say those things on social media. Say your exact joke on social media. Nobody will care that it's the same content. But what they will do is if they like it, they'll look at you, they'll see you have a podcast, and they'll want to listen to more of that kind of stuff. And so they're like, well, where do I get more jokes like this, right? Like, seriously, post the stuff that you talk about on your show. If you are like a sports podcast, while you're watching the game, live tweet, play-by-play, what you thought of this game, what's going on. If you're a TV show podcast, live tweet while you're watching the show. Like, get involved in this because you talk so much about these things. You know how to talk on social media about it. Trust me, just naturally take the conversation there and get going. Like, post like crazy. I've looked at all the top sports podcasters out there, and every single one of the top sports podcasters have over 20,000 tweets. Why is that the commonality? It's because they love talking about sports, even so much that they can talk it all over Twitter and all over their podcast. Like, you love talking about whatever topic you have on your podcast, so just keep that conversation going all the way online. Oh, I want to show you some of my Instagram strategies. So I do have an Instagram, and I post there, and I just want to kind of show you a couple things. So this is my latest post, right? So I post a new thing, and the first thing I want to show you is I've got a ton of hashtags. I think it's important to do a bunch of hashtags, and I'll show you why more in a minute. But when I have people commenting, look at this. I'm responding to every single comment that comes in to Instagram, and I'll show you why that's important in a minute. So I want to go to the post statistics, and I want you to see this. 36% of the people who saw this post were not following me. They weren't following me. Now, how did I get 36%? Because in Instagram, it's hard to get people who aren't following you to see you. Well, if we look down here, you can see from hashtags, 4,000 people saw this post. Now, here's how Instagram works. When you post something, first they show it to a handful of your followers and say, hey, what do you guys think of this post this guy just posted? And if they like it enough and comment enough, then Instagram is going to show it to more people and say, hey, some early people like this. You guys like this too? And if they like it enough and comment enough, then Instagram starts showing it to bigger audiences. And if that still gets engagement, then Instagram's like, well, this post has legs. Let's show it to more people. And that's when they start introducing it to hashtags and stuff like that to say, hey, this I think is worth checking out. A lot of people like this. You might like it too. And what Instagram wants to do is keep their users on their app longer. So it makes sense for them to show content that they think is good, right? And that's their way to figure out if something is good. Show it to a little. Do they like it? Show it to a little bit more. Do they like it? If so, okay, keep making it bigger. Like, make this post bigger. And that's how posts get bigger. So that's why I'm responding to every comment on my post, because when people comment, I can join in on that. And then other people see this post and are like, oh, I want to comment too, because comments seem to be hot right now. You know, the guy who made this is writing back, so maybe I'll write back. So I'm commenting just to encourage more comments, to get more comments in there, to get people to comment, to let them know I read the comments. Like, let's get in the comments, right? So that helps the growth of the post. And then I put all those hashtags in so that when Instagram does want to expand to bigger audiences, I easily know what, I'm helping Instagram, like, here's the audiences I want you to reach because I'm putting the hashtags in here, right? And so Instagram's like, got it, we'll take care of it, like it's kind of a deal that we have with each other. Like, oh, you want to expand this to more people? Here's some hashtags to give out. So that's why that shows up there. So, that's just kind of an anatomy of a post, but I want you to show you another thing. So when I do make a post, what happened? It started over. All right. So when I do make a post, I also make a story. And when I make a new episode, people post stories. Here is a story that someone else posted saying, oh, I've been listening to this podcast or whatever. And so I add that story to my stories. So I want to show you what stories are. Stories are posts that only happen for one day. And so it just is there for a day and it goes away. That's the story I made. But then all the rest of these are stories that other people have made. And I posted them to my stories. So you can see kind of these white bars at the top up here. You can see there's like 10 people who have posted stories saying, hi, I'm listening to this show. It's high quality content. You should check it out too. And this is great. This is so great that other people are posting posts about my podcast to their followers. Like this is reaching tons of other people. And that's great. This is making my listeners marketers. And again, this is so much better than somebody leaving a rating or review on a podcast, because they're actually getting their followers to check this show out, or they're seeing the artwork or something and saying, oh, okay, I definitely have to go listen to that. So this is what I mean by setting social media on fire. If you can step away from social media and people are talking about your show on there, you've got social media on fire. Like, you can't put this out now. Now it's spreading in a way that's out of your control. And that's where you want to be. Now, that, nailing those things that I've talked about can probably get you to 1,500 listeners. Again, the most important thing is having a great show. Without that, you might not ever get to 1,500 listeners. So now if you've got this far, you want to get to 15,000. Let's make that our goal. That'll put you in the top 3% of most popular podcasts in the world. At this stage, your oxygen is word of mouth. So you want to encourage it, celebrate it, and teach it. You see how all these people are posting Instagram stories about me? That's because I go wild when they do that. I say, oh my gosh, this totally made my day. I can't believe you posted this. I am like doing backflips over here. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. And guess what? When I do the next episode, they're going to post that one too. And the next one and the next one. And so you go crazy when somebody does have that kind of word of mouth thing that you see on social media. And again, at this level, you might be able to interact with every single time somebody engages with your show, because you can do that. There's just so much coming. You don't have that much coming at you at this stage. So you can do that. You can retweet that. You can share that. You can say thank you. You can send them a private message that you appreciate it, whatever. Just keep that engagement going. If they engaged with you, engage back, right? So teach it. Show them how to do it. I had to show people, like, this is what I like. And I did that by getting a couple of my friends to post Instagram stories like that at the beginning, right? I said, hey, can you post this latest episode to your story? And, in exchange, I'll post something for you on yours, whatever you want. So, we were able to do these swaps at the beginning. And then I was able to, kind of make that a thing. And it took a year to make that a thing, but it totally pays off, because now when I post a new episode, it goes crazy on social media. And why? Because I kind of taught that. I taught what I want to see there. And you want to make your show very shareable, because your audience is doing the hard work of getting your show to, in front of new eyes, right? They're sharing it to their people. And so when they share it, what is the best way for those new people to get into the show, right? Well, you can be on social media. Like, you can say, oh, here's the person who made it, and now they can go follow you, and then they can find the thing from there. But whenever somebody posts things, you want to make sure that you're posting. Here, let me give you an example. So here's one of my latest episodes, right? So it has this kind of artwork. This is my website, and if I were to share this on Twitter, I can go to this card validator, and this will show you what the card will look like on Twitter. So it has this image. That's the image for that episode, right? And it has the title, and it has the title of the show, and it has a little description. This is great because, like I said, your audience is doing the hard work of getting this to new listeners, new eyes. Now it's time for you to seal that deal, to finalize that, to say, okay, look at how alluring this is. Look at how captivating this is. Let me explain it to you one last time. And now all the listener has to do is click and you've got them sold, basically. Because if they go to your website or whatever, boom, you've drawn them in even more, right? You've got to incorporate marketing into all of these different things. And you can't just think of it as like something to add on after. But you've got to put it into the show's artwork. And you don't need to have individual episode artwork. That's not necessary. I do it just because it's fun, but it's very stressful to come up with new artwork every episode, and it's a lot of work. But just to have like a really good show artwork, and for the podcast in general, and have that here on your card. But the thing is I want you to pop on social media. I want you to look good and stand out, and making sure that you look good is an important step for marketing, because your audience is sharing this link. Your audience is posting this particular link to say, oh, you've got to go listen to this episode. So make that link look good when they do post it. You want to be as shareable as possible, because at this point, you should have some raving fans. If you get to 1,500 listeners, probably like 1% of them are diehard fans at this point. They love everything that you do. They think you're the best in the world, and they'll buy anything that you tell them to buy. Like, oh, we've got some merch. Okay, we'll buy some merch. Oh, okay, we're going to do this live show. Okay, we're coming to the live show. All right, we just made this book. Oh, we're going to buy the book. Like they're going to be involved with anything you put out at this point, right? And so you really have to help them sell the show in any way you can, by being on the social medias that they're on, by having a great looking website, and this just nails the sale. Another thing you can do to spread the word of your show is to be a guest on other podcasts. Podchaser.com is a website, and if I look up my name there, it tells me how many podcasts I've been a guest on. Guest appearance, 21 podcasts. I literally do a podcast interview a month or a week. Every week I do another interview with another show. And that's because I think it's a fantastic marketing strategy. You're a podcaster. You get this. Go be a guest on another podcast. Go find someone. Go find shows that resonate with you and say, hey, I would love to be a guest because I do a show very similar or something, whatever. Get out there, be in front of people. And literally people who have listened to these shows have come to me and said, I've heard you from that show. I would love to, I started listening to your show from there, and I just love your shows since then, right? So, even if you catch 10 people per podcast you go on, well, that's 210 people that I got, 210 new listeners. To me, that's worth it, because you just want to keep scooping up people here and there and here and there, wherever you can. I'm grabbing listeners wherever I can, and however I can. And if you can get a guest, like a popular guest, that's another cool marketing technique, because they might have 20,000 followers on Twitter or something. And if they come on your show and they liked it, and you say, hey, can you please share this with your Twitter? They might retweet it or something. And now you've got people who like that person coming in and listening to your show. So you're picking up new listeners there. And then it's another thing is when you have like guests that are popular or good, you can, people who come to your show and they look at like what guests have you had on in the past, they can say, oh, I like this person. So this might be a good show because I like some of the guests they've already had. I think I'd like to, check this out. So it's kind of a social proofing too, to have big names on your show. So get big names if you can. Start out with smaller names and just keep building up, like people who are old, right? And then people who are off season. So like if you have a sports podcast, don't interview people in the middle of their season, but off season would be good. People who are no longer working or something like that, like if you're trying to interview a TV show person or something, like they're not doing anything now, it would be a better time to get an interview with them, that kind of thing. And you can just literally just ask a ton of people and see if anyone says yes. Promo swaps have been really helpful for me in the past. Extremely helpful, actually. I did one with Hackable and Malicious Life, and it was so successful that Pacific Content Blog actually wrote about it. And so what I did was I put one of Hackable's episodes, the whole episode, in my feed, and I put one of Malicious Life's episodes in my feed. And then they did the both. They did with me too. They put one of my episodes in their feed and played that. And you can see this graph here. This first red line is when Malicious Life put my episode in their feed. And then all these lines here are all of my podcast episodes. And so they all went up in terms of downloads. And then when Hackable put my episode in their feed, they were a much bigger show. All my episodes went up again. So just across the board, people just started listening to my show. And I got a ton of new listeners from that. And yeah, it might have died down. And that's kind of the importance of having a great show. If I get this opportunity to get a whole bunch of new listeners from some other source, I better have it land and stick, right? So I don't want it to hit and then people stop listening. So since then, I've had a great explosive growth. That was kind of an explosive month for me. And yeah, it just kept going all year. So that was a fantastic opportunity. So how do you do a promo swap? First, you need to find shows. So you're a podcaster. I hope you know what kind of podcasts are in your area, like are similar to yours or competitors of yours. Nobody's really a competitor in this space. Everyone is friends. So find shows that are similar to yours. And then you need to find shows that are sort of the same size. So if you go to Castbox, this is a podcast app, or you can go to castbox.fm and you can look at their website and you can type in a show name and it'll tell you how many subscribers and downloads that show has in Castbox. And so this will give you an idea of how big your show is compared to some of the other shows that you're looking to do a promo swap with. And then just reach out. You can go to their RSS feed and you can see there's an email address in the RSS feed. You can email that and you can get the show creator right away probably and say, hey, I want to do a promo swap or an episode swap. And so what's the difference here? An episode is the whole episode gets swapped, but a promo is like a 30-second or 60-second pitch for the other show. Hey, if you like this podcast a lot, I've got a recommendation for you, another podcast that's very similar to mine. It's just as good. You're going to love it. You should go check it out. And it's blah, 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 right? So you have like just a promo swap. And you might even be able to record your own promo for yourself and give it to them. And if that's the case, you want to make like a killer promo and say, oh man, let's really sell this. Like, let's add some clips from the show or something, where you can really get into it. And this is it's good to practice making these promos and good to practice reading ads and stuff and writing ads because you have to sell yourself sometimes. And, it takes practice to do that. So, yeah, promo swaps, episode swaps have been pretty helpful in the past. And since then, I've done a ton of other promo swaps with shows. And basically, if my show is 10,000, downloads per episode, I can offer to put, an ad in for 10,000 downloads or something. And you can do in return or something. So it's just it's a nice, good way to like share audiences. Here's another thing I did was I reached out to creators. Basically, I made a list of a whole bunch of YouTubers, podcasters, newsletter writers, journalists, authors, speakers, and influencers that I think would like my show. And I made a list of 200 of their email addresses, and I emailed them all one by one. I didn't do a big spam BCC, copy everyone on it. I emailed them each individually because I didn't want it to look spammy. I wanted it to look, legit and sincere. And it basically said, I really think that you would like this show. It's right up your alley. It covers a lot of the things that I've heard you say, before. Just basically like that. And out of the 200, I got 2 results. First one was Brian Brushwood, who is actually has his TV show on National Geographic and is a comedian. And he talks about the same stuff I talk about sometimes in his content. So I sent him an email. He's like, whoa, this is crazy. And then tweeted this. Darknet Diaries is a fantastic podcast. Wow. He has 1.6 million followers. This totally made my day. And I'm still amazed by this. And then a couple weeks later, The Guardian wrote an article and it said, This Week in Radio. And then it was my show, Darknet Diaries. And Again, I was totally blown away. I had such a party that day. Like, oh yes, I feel legit now. Like I felt legit, and my audience, my potential new audiences feel legit too, right? You remember when I went to my website and I showed you, I put news articles of talking about my show on the front page of my site, and so that kind of legitimizes my show. Like people are like, oh, that's really cool. That. This is becoming a big show. I need to get in on this, right? So it feels, the show feels bigger when something like this talks about. And I wasn't that big when they, mentioned me. And I didn't get that many clicks from this article, but I used it as leverage to tell other people, like, look, Guardian's writing about me. That's helped tremendously for certain things. Another thing you can do to grow your audience is just deliver more value. Stop thinking about how do I go find new listeners. Instead, think, how can I keep my current listeners listening longer? Maybe your listeners listen for 3 episodes and then stop and they listen to a different show, or 5 episodes. Now you have to try to figure out, okay, how do I get them to listen to twice as many of my episodes before stopping, right? You may not make a goal to listen to everything, but you want to keep them as long as you can. So how do you do that? You deliver even more value and more value. So you figure out what it is your audience needs. And if you can get them to react like this guy in this picture of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm seeing or hearing or whatever, that's the kind of the takeaway that I'm trying to get you to think about here. Because if they can do that, they're going to want to listen to more and another episode because they want that experience again. That's a fantastic experience of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. This is amazing. So, how do you provoke that in someone? You do something noteworthy or newsworthy or remarkable or amazing. And you just want to focus on giving more and more value to your audience. Like find out, like you have all these conversations going with different people too now, right? You've got engagements with listeners. They're messaging you and commenting. Find out what it is they want more than anything on your show. What are they waiting? What episode are they waiting to hear? All these things, and deliver that in spades. Make your current audience happier somehow. And that is going to turn them into, marketers themselves. They're going to be telling people, hey, this show is fantastic. It's so good. You have to listen to this. And that's what your goal is here, is word of mouth is so, so important. All right. So from there, you might be able to hit 15,000 listeners per episode. So what's the next goal? Might as well make it 150,000 listeners, because if you can hit that, this will put you in the top 0.5%, top 1% of most popular podcasts. And if you can hit to 150,000 listeners, you've made it in the sense that you can monetize this thing and have a full-time income, and you can even like pay for other people to help make it and stuff. So yeah, if you can get here, your life has changed. This is literally life-changing if you can get to 150,000 downloads per episode. But this is hard. This is really hard to grow. I mean, it could just take time. That's fine. But to kind of get it quicker, it requires outside forces. It's not something I can really go tell you that this is how you do it. It takes luck and just the way the world is, I don't know, just luck and outside forces. So one thing you can do is try to get featured on apps. I think I was featured on like 3 different podcast apps, and it was just luck every time. I'll give you an example. The Apple Podcasts has featured, and I know that in order to get featured there, you have to submit a form and you have to submit some artwork, because they have this banner that they're going to feature you with. So they want special artwork that goes with it, and they want a reason why they should feature you. And you can't just say because I want to. I think it will be good growth. And then they also ask the question, well, how are you going to help us? Right? We're helping you by helping, spread your show. What are you doing for us, for Apple? And so I knew this. And so for 3 months before asking to be featured, I posted every social media post said, listen on Apple Podcasts. And I sent a link to Apple Podcasts. And on my website, it was the biggest button you ever saw that said, listen on Apple Podcasts. And I made sure that everywhere, even in the episode, I said, listen on Apple Podcasts, and you have to be very specific. They don't like iTunes. They want Apple Podcasts. And they don't like the old iTunes logo. They want the new Apple Podcast logo. And you don't want to mess up any of these things. You have to be very specific. And so for 3 months, I just did so much marketing for Apple Podcasts. And so when they asked the question, when I was ready at the end of 3 months, what are you going to do for us? I had all these links. I showed them, look at this post had a ton of engagement. In this episode, I talked about you, like all these things. And I submitted this and no response, no featured, nothing. All that work was just gone, wasted, didn't happen. So I waited a year and then did it again. I built up again, 3 months into it. 3 months before I started, supporting Apple and telling them, oh, listen on here, whatever. And then I submitted a request again. This time I had news articles saying, look at all these news outlets are talking about me and stuff. Obviously this is pretty important. I've also been featured in these other apps, and that kind of also made it easy for Apple to say, okay, well, instead of us having to vet this show and listen to it, I think, if it was in the New York Times, it probably is worth listening to. Let's go ahead and feature it. And so the second time around, I did get featured. But again, I just think it was so lucky and not easy to do that I can't recommend that you go and try this at the beginning. You really need to wait until you have a good solid show with a good solid movement on it before going for something like that. And the other apps were just as wild of a story of just being in the right time, the right place, and asking the app creators how do you choose which shows get featured and stuff. And sometimes the app creator themselves curates it, and so making friends with them, or you could do weird guerrilla marketing where you have one of your friends tweet at that podcast app maker and say, hey, I think you would really like this show. Check it out. So it doesn't look like it's coming from you and it doesn't look spammy. I call it that's guerrilla marketing because it's just kind of marketing that's not typical. It's a little out of ordinary. But that's, being featured on apps can really boost your number. And then trending on apps is another thing. So obviously Apple Podcast has the charts, but there's other podcast apps that are very popular podcast apps, and they have trending charts too. I think Pocket Cast has one, and Podcast Addict has another trending chart, and Spotify has a trending chart. So if you can somehow get trending on these things, that is really helpful. That's tricky because what are you going to do? You're going to put all your links to one podcast app. Like what happened to me once is I had a big Twitter account post, oh, you got to listen to this. And they specifically linked to Pocket Casts, my show on Pocket Casts. And so all the people who are clicking on Pocket Casts link saw that and just played it right there and said, let's test it right here. And so my show started trending on Pocket Casts because this big person, this big Twitter account tweeted at me. And then I started trending, and then that got its own momentum after that. So I kind of had a 1-2 punch. Number one, the Twitter post, and number two, the rise in the trending. So it's not easy to do, but these are things that can happen that can really help. And then if you have any big influencers that can recommend the show, like I said, news outlets, YouTubers, other podcasters, keep asking. Like I sent 200 emails. Well, I didn't stop there. I ended up sending something like 10,000 emails by the time I was done. And I was just trying to get my show in front of as many people as possible. And it wasn't super spammy of oh, please listen to this and share it with your audience. It was just listen, you write about this kind of stuff all the time. I think you should be aware of this show, and I think you would really like it. Like a good, honest email. And that, picked up as well. Like I got featured in some newsletters, and I even got a call in. AM radio show called me, and we talked about my show once too, and it was wild. So, a lot of things, like I said, 1 out of 100 seems to work. So sometimes it's just a numbers game. And then the other thing is that when you have that social proofing happening, if I have 1 or 2 news outlets that wrote about me, now it's easier for a third news outlet to write about me. A lot of them don't want to be the first one to write about a podcast because is this podcast controversial, or does it say things that, harm certain people? They don't know. And they don't want to spend the time listening to hours and hours of your podcast to try to figure it out. So they just don't post. And then when you see 3 or 4 news outlets posting about it, then somebody bigger like the New York Times can say, all right, let's post about this because it seems to be safe enough. Right. So there's the social proofing there, and there's momentum that comes with getting, attention of your show. So all those strategies pretty much don't cost any money. I guess you could pay for artwork or you could pay for a website, but those are the only things I've really mentioned that actually cost. Oh yeah, there's books you can buy and courses you can buy. But those probably weren't where you were thinking of spending money on marketing, was it? So if you do want to spend money on marketing, here's some other things you can do. And I've done all these and they've all had various levels of success. I mean, improve your show first. Of course, you can take a course, read a book, whatever. But you can also hire an editor, hire a producer, hire, people to actually help make it and do it in a more professional way. Of course, you can get better equipment and stuff like that. You want to make a great show. How many times do I have to tell you? I've sponsored a conference before, and I've done this a few different ways. Like there's the traditional sponsorship method, but I've also reached out to a small conference and said, "Hey, I want to buy all the stickers for your conference." And they're like, "Oh, cool, thanks. We would appreciate that." And I said, "But I want you, when you're handing out the stickers for your conference, I want you to hand out one sticker, to my of my show in the same, bag or whatever. However you're giving the stickers out, I want you to give my stickers to my podcast to you." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. We could do that." And so I sent them 2 packs of stickers, one for their podcast or one for their conference and one for my show. And it worked. I mean, I got in front of 150 people. That was all that came to the conference. But at least, my sticker showed up in their little baggie. And it wasn't a podcast conference. I mean, my show's about security, cybersecurity, and it was a cybersecurity conference. So figure out what conference is in your niche and be part of those conferences. You can wear shirts there. You can get your friends to wear shirts walking around. I've gone to another conference where I brought 3,000 stickers and I put 20 on every empty table I saw when I was at the conference. And I went through 3,000 stickers in one weekend. And every table was empty like a couple minutes later. Like they were just picking up the stickers like crazy. So, I mean, that cost me a few $100s in stickers. So, I mean, these are money spending strategies, right? But it was worth it because everyone on their flight home or on their drive home were listening to my show and finding a new podcast to check out. So I think it was definitely worth it. And people like stickers. I use stickers more often than a business card. Instead of giving people a business card saying, "Oh, here's my show, check it out." No, I give them a sticker because I think they're less likely to throw a sticker away. I think they'll throw it in a drawer or keep it or stick it somewhere, and that's cooler to me. You could do influencer marketing on social media. So if you want to grow you could pay Twitter or Facebook ad money, like buy ads on there. But I don't like that. I like to find people who have large follower accounts and pay them. Like I reach out to them and I say, "Hey, how much would it cost to do a post on your social media feed?" And they'll say, "Oh, $20 or $100 or whatever." I'll say, "Okay." And then I'll give them the money and then I'll tell them what to post and I'll show them the image and the text and stuff and they'll post exactly what I ask them. And it's great. And this is called influencer marketing because this actually is cheaper than paying Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and it reaches a bigger audience. So you get better bang for your buck. It's harder to do, takes more time. It feels more organic because it just feels like, oh, this person likes my show, or this person likes this podcast. Maybe I'll check it out too, and it works. It works really well. So I've done that, and I've done that only for the sense of growing my Instagram audience. Like I wanted to get to 10,000 followers, and that was one trick I did. Was I paid marketers to say follow this account. That's pretty much it. Because once I get to 10,000, then I knew the posts that I would make would spread better and I would get, faster traction and it kind of opened up a whole new world. So, I mean, I spent about $500 to get there. And this is getting more popular. I mean, even Snoop Dogg for a few $100s, he'll post whatever you want on his Twitter or something, right? So it's like, this is not a weird thing. It's not an illegal thing either. Social media companies understand this and actually, support it in some ways. Like there's one made by YouTube, like a social media marketing marketplace made by YouTube, right? So it's fine. And you can also do paid ads in other podcasts. I've done this quite a bit. I've spent quite a lot of money to have a little 30-second ad for my show in other podcasts. And yeah, I mean, if you're a podcast fan and you're listening to podcasts and you hear an ad for another podcast, that is an easy sell for those people. It's harder to get people who don't listen to podcasts to come check out your show because they don't know what app to use or how to find it. And there's a couple of confusing steps. But people who are already into podcasts, it's easy to market them another podcast. So that worked out pretty well. And then you can also do paid ads in podcast players. So like, for instance, Overcast, the app has an ad marketplace where you can spend, I think, like $400 or something to have an ad in there. And basically there's a little banner in their apps that says, listen to this show. And you can click it and instantly get the show. So it's kind of nice because it's in the podcast player. So when you click it, you're already in the podcast player. You can just go subscribe. It's real easy. And so for like $400, you get like 150 new followers, subscribers to your show. That could be all right starting out, but if you're in the 15,000 or up, subscribers, 150 new people for $400 isn't maybe not that effective. You can try it. So it all depends on where you are. And yeah, I mean, these are some paid strategies that you can consider. So if you want to read more, I mean, all I'm really talking about here is marketing, really. It's marketing a podcast is not any different than marketing anything else. So there's a lot of books on marketing that you can totally get into. And I'm really, honestly, just scratching the surface on this. There's a ton more ideas in these books. Let me go over some of these. So Make Noise is my favorite book on podcasting, and they have one chapter on marketing, and it's actually pretty good. Make Noise is so good. The book is just so good. So start there. Seth Godin is a great marketer. He talks about marketing. He's just fantastic. He really gets you to think outside the box. And his latest book is called This is Marketing, which is kind of a roundup of all his marketing strategies. Doesn't really go into depth on anything, but it really gets you into thinking about marketing in general. It's really good. And the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, I thought was an interesting read. It helped me like clarify a couple things. Like, for instance, one of the first few laws is like, create your own category. And of course, like the only book here for podcasts is Make Noise. The other ones are just marketing books. But I'm thinking like, okay, how do I create my own category in podcasts? Like, I can't go to Apple Podcasts and say, can you make me a new category? Like, that doesn't happen. So it took me a while to understand this, but eventually I realized, wait, I have a podcast that's like cybercrime meets true crime. So that's my category. Cybercrime, true crime podcast. Like that doesn't exist, right? So that's my category. And if you're the first person to land in your category, then you can become the best in your category. You by default, you are the best because you're the only, right? So that was interesting. Like, if you can position or market your show in a specific way that it's the only one that does this, and that's your category that you're just killing it in, then that, when people are looking for that kind of thing, you're going to be the only one they find. And of course, anyone who comes after you is going to be trailing you because you were there first, and that makes you the biggest. Small Giants is a great book, and Crushing It is by Gary Vaynerchuk. He talks about how you can just really get crazy on social media and all the different tricks you could do on social media to just really become noticeable and memorable. And it's fantastic. I really liked it because he really kicks your butt. Like, he really says, what are you waiting for? Like, there's nothing to wait for. Start posting right now. Like, these are the things you should be posting. Why are you reading this book? Just go post like forever. So it's really a butt kicker. Like, once you read that, you're like, all right, fine. There's no reason why I shouldn't be doing this. Traction, I think, is a really good book by Gabriel Weinberg. He's the one who created the website DuckDuckGo. And he just talks about how you gain traction on any like online thing. And a podcast is an online thing. Superfans is a great book. It's made by Pat Flynn. I was talking to you a lot about how you have to deliver more value to your audience and get them to like your show more and more and more. This is kind of that book, right? It's how do you make a regular fan into a super fan, and how does that have a positive impact on your show? It has a great impact on your show to have super fans. They're going to be, your number one marketers. And this is a book on how to make super fans. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. And then there's the old 0 to 1, which is by Peter Thiel. I think he made PayPal. And yeah, it just talks about making something from nothing, and then what the ethos is of that particular thing. Like, what's the vision and the strategy of this, and how do we want to brand ourselves and stuff. So it really has an interesting way to kind of imagine you as like as a bigger entity in the future. And so, in conclusion, which strategies should you adopt? All of them. I mean, if I were to ride my bicycle across the country and you were to ask me which pedal of your bike was the most effective one to get you across the country, I'd be like, are you crazy? It took me like 10 million pedals to get across the country. Which one was effective? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And that's why I'm here for an hour and a half telling you about all these different strategies, because all of them are equally as effective. I can't tell you which one of my subscribers was the best one to get because they were the ones who told the most amount of people or had the biggest influence on getting other people. I just don't know, right? And so you could have 10 subscribers and one of them is Oprah Winfrey. And you don't know if maybe tomorrow she's going to, talk about it on her podcast or on her TV show or whatever. And like, hey, you got to check out this podcast. I'm loving it. And then boom, stuff happens. So how did you get Oprah Winfrey on as a listener? Like, that is a question that I'll never be able to answer if that's the case, right? So you just don't know. It's just such a mystery on how people find podcasts. Because I've asked everyone, how'd you find it? And everyone, I don't know. And typically people find it because of one of the things I've done here. But it's kind of a fuzzy thing if you think about it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this long. I hope this has been enjoyable and valuable to you. If you want to know more about podcasting, I publish some articles on lime.link. Thanks.